it is impossible for you to get sick if your iron level is up to par.
The statements in this video have a kernel of truth, but are very inaccurately represented. Importantly, anemia is when an individual is not able to create enough properly formed red blood cells, because iron is necessary for the process of making properly formed and functioning red blood cells. Iron deficiency anemia is the most common form of anemia worldwide. Anemia of chronic disease is the process by which, in the state of excessive inflammation, such as autoimmune conditions, infections, cancer, congestive cardiac failure, chronic kidney disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and other inflammatory conditions, as well as simply just getting sick, we are met with what is referred to as anemia of chronic disease. But very importantly, this is not a state of not having enough iron inside of our body. When inflammation occurs, the iron inside of our bloodstream is uptaken out of the bloodstream and put into a storage protein called ferritin, which reduces our transferrin level and iron saturation level, which are markers of iron in the bloodstream. The response of the body to take iron out of the bloodstream appears to be an evolutionary conserved adaptation. This is because, in a similar way to the reason that iron is necessary for red blood cell production, iron is necessary for bacteria to replicate and multiply. Therefore, sequestering iron out of the bloodstream starves these pathogens of iron, which is a host defense to quell the infection. However, as mentioned, this response occurs to any sort of inflammation. So when someone is sick, the process of increasing inflammation sequesters iron out of the bloodstream, meaning there is insufficient iron for red blood cell production. And we refer to this as anemia of chronic disease. However, that is very different than saying iron itself prevents disease or stops the disease process. In fact, the data that we currently have indicates that having elevated iron stores increases susceptibility to disease and worsens the response to and the severity of infections and inflammatory conditions. And giving iron to people who have low iron levels due to inflammation increases the severity of current infections and the risk of future infections, likely because there is now more substrate for any bacteria that might inhabit the body to use to replicate and grow. And there is far more evidence about the use of iron chelators, which bind to iron and reduce free available iron levels, as a therapeutic intervention during sickness. Essentially, saying that everyone who is sick has anemia isn't necessarily incorrect, because the process of having inflammation can sequester iron out of the bloodstream. However, this does not mean that we don't have enough iron in our body, and this certainly does not mean iron itself is preventing or reducing the severity of any sort of infection. Rather, more evidence indicates to the idea that excess iron and taking iron during sickness can increase the risk of sickness and increase the severity of pre-existing sickness.